So right now in our book talk segment, man has written a book about a man who is, of course, very popular in our part of the woods here in Florida, of course, popular all over the world with his music. It's called Jimmy Buffett, A Good Life All the Way, and his biography. And we're joined today by award-winning writer Ryan White. He also wrote a book about Bruce Springsteen and several other articles in newspapers and magazines. And he joined us from Portland, Oregon today on the telephone. And Ryan White, good to talk with you. How are you today?
I am great. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, good to have a chance to talk with you a little bit, and read through the book, enjoyed it. I didn't know a lot about Jimmy Buffett, just maybe as a casual fan of his music, but of course everybody kind of knows, Key West and Key Largo and all that. This part of the woods here in Florida, that's kind of where it all maybe not began for him, but that's where it kind of took off for him, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's really where he found his voice in a lot of ways. He had gone to Nashville in 1969. He got married, went up from Mobile, Alabama to Nashville to make it as a songwriter, and, was too folk for country, was too country for rock and roll, couldn't really find a place. Made a couple of really interesting records that didn't get any attention at the time. One didn't even get released at the time. And then, the marriage fell apart. His career wasn't going anywhere. He flew to Coconut Grove to see Jerry Jeff Walker. He was supposed to have a gig there, and was going to stay with Jerry Jeff. And the gig got moved out a week, and they decided that they should hit the road and go down to Key West. And he kind of, fell right into the scene. They drove straight to the chart room, met Tom Corcoran. Corcoran gave him a beer, and kind of that was the beginning of history, really. A few years, 6 years later, that was November 71. By November 76, they're in a studio up in Miami, recording Changes in Latitudes, Changes in Attitudes. Margaritaville gets put down, and now 40 years later, there's never been another song like it.
Yeah, he really, which is very hard to do in music, and rock groups back in the 60s, you all try to create their own niche, but he really created one that's as unique as anybody else ever did, right? Just kind of, like you said, Key West, and creating that type of music. Nobody else has really done that before or since in the same way.
Yeah, I mean, it was a place where he could really operate without any real rules. It was, when he got there were writers, Tennessee Williams is down there. He's talked about, playing Hank Williams songs for Tennessee Williams by the pool. Tom McGuane and Jim Harrison were running around there. Richard Brodigan. There were artists. Vaughn Cochran, who was actually a washboard player in the very, very earliest incarnation of the Coral Reefer Band. He had a pottery degree, and he went down there and he told me, he met another guy with a pottery degree, and I asked him, I said, how many pottery degrees were running around Key West in 1971? Many, it turns out, but there were no musicians. Jimmy was kind of the one guy that was doing original stuff, and it was the freedom of that time. It was a relatively empty island. Everybody who got there around that time talks about how, you could just ride a bike anywhere, and there were no cars and there were no people. So when you wanted to get crazy at night, there were plenty of places to go crazy, and there was also a lot of peacefulness during the day. You could go out fishing. You could do all of these things. And it was kind of the perfect place to find your voice while he continued to work the road and became part of, a regular kind of visitor to the Austin scene that was growing, because Jerry Jeff had gone there, and Willie Nelson had moved down from Nashville, and so while he couldn't, he never really fit a genre. He figured out how to be him. He believed in himself. He was himself, and he just maintained that until suddenly one day he was the genre that everybody was kind of imitating.
The music that he created, of course, we all know the hit songs. Did he have an inkling of that? Did you think, or it just kind of grew out of? The grouping of people he met down there, the atmosphere, or did he always have something in the back of his mind saying, this is what I want to do? It just happened to be that he did it in Key West.
I mean, I think he was going to be a guy who was going to take a run at songwriting for as long as he could do it. I mean, he, growing up, when he was in college, he spent a ton of time kind of in New Orleans and learning the stagecraft and how to perform. And, he's a natural at that. Everybody from those early days remembers that kind of energy and that megawatt smile that really has never changed from the very beginning to the end. There's this funny thing that you can do they're too big and not really flexible enough to do it, but if you were to lay out all of the album covers in something like a flip book and you flip through them, you would see kind of beach style change a little. You would see the hair fade and white. You'd lose the big bushy 70s mustache eventually, but that smile is consistent all the way through. And it's, I was talking with Mac McAnally, who stands, to Jimmy's right every night on stage, and Jimmy and Mac talked about what they do is this rolling ball of goodwill, and that's kind of, and that comes from that smile and that spirit, and that's what keeps people coming back year after year, and what has led to Margaritaville being able to successfully navigate 40 years of cultural change in this country. I mean, when I say that there's never been a song like it, it's, to have what was the 14th biggest hit of 1977, according to Billboard, be a $2 billion business this year is a remarkable thing.
Yeah, the whole Parrot Head Nation. I mean, that's an offshoot of all that, which I can't even imagine he even thought that would be as big as it was.
No, they laugh about it still. Mike Utley, who's the only other guy besides Jimmy to play on every record since '73, talked about how any career over a period of time is going to have its peaks and its valleys, and they were kind of in a valley with album sales and stuff in the mid-'80s, and suddenly the crowds just started getting bigger and they were more brightly adorned. Tom Corcoran talked about he went up to Atlanta to see a show one time, and he hadn't seen one in a little while, and he knew the beer distributor at the venue, and they were walking around, and he looked out and saw everybody in Hawaiian shirts and looked at the guy and said, "Well, how long has this been going on?" And, the distributor was like, "Oh, a couple of years now." And it built really organically. In the early '90s, a guy named Scott Nickerson, who's a musician and loved Buffett, realized he was in Atlanta, and he looked around and he said, "Why is it that I see these same people every year at this show, and we all get along great, and we have this in common, and I don't see them again until the next year when Jimmy comes?" So he put a tiny little free ad in a weekly paper in Atlanta, looking for other Buffett fans to meet, and that was the first Parrot Head Club. There's more than 220 of them now.
Wow. I didn't know there was that many. Yeah.
Yeah. I emailed each of them individually recently. It takes a long time. There's a lot of them.
Now, he's obviously, the record sales and all that have been great, but primarily a live performer. You rarely see him on television. I seem to remember him being on Johnny Carson maybe a few times when Johnny had the Tonight Show, but not a lot of television. So it's primarily live performing and of course records, right? That keeps him going.
Not a lot of television. Not a lot of television. Not a lot of radio. It was funny. Don Light, who was who was his manager after he got to Key West. He hooked up with Don Light, and Don was this really fantastic character in Nashville who kind of created the gospel music industry. He realized that everything was a handshake deal, and he introduced contracts to it and stuff. And he died before I started working on the book, but Peter Cooper, who is a fantastic journalist in Nashville, let me into a very long interview that he had done with Don a year or two before Don Light died, and he talked about all the years that he couldn't get Buffett, get Jimmy a record deal where everybody would say, "Hey, we like him, but we can't get him on the radio. Right. We like him, but we can't get him on the radio." And Light goes, and they weren't wrong about that. They could never get him on the radio, and he could never make it in Nashville until one day, songs like "It's 5 O'Clock Somewhere" are being written and asking, this now seminal question: what would Jimmy Buffett do? It's it's a very unusual story and an unusual path to success, which is one of the reasons why he had so much trouble early on, because nobody had the imagination to see that you could do this some other way than the way that it had been done.
Yeah. When he decided to write the book, was he amenable to it? Is he the kind of guy that likes talking about himself, or is he kind of a introspective kind of guy, doesn't like to talk much?
Well, he did not sit down and talk with me for this. My understanding from people very close to him who did sit down and talk with me is that he still plans. He's written bestsellers on his own, and he still plans on writing. One more. I hope 2 or 3 more. I'll be among the first to get my hands on that. But that was what I was told was thinking on that. Yeah. So I hope that if he sees it, I sent him a copy. He realizes it came from in an appreciative place, and I think just the sheer number of people that we talked to kind of put some outside perspective on on what he has built.
Yeah, you really captured a lot of the story, which I had not heard before, so I think a lot of the fans out there are going to be interested in it. And again, it's called Jimmy Buffett, A Good Life All the Way, and it's still going strong. I imagine he's in pretty good health. I guess he's in his early 70s now, right? But he's still doing pretty well, right?
And he was just surfing over in Fiji. He's started using Instagram in a way that'll drive you nuts. When you have, when you can watch a guy who has the sense of style that he has jet around the world, and he ran into Harrison Ford over in Fiji, and then was hanging with Mavis Staples at the Byron Bay Blues Fest in Australia, and then shot over to do some bone fishing on Christmas Island. It's it's a pretty good life. I joked with somebody when they asked me, one of my friends, and about a year ago when they asked if I'd heard from Jimmy yet working on this, I said, if you see, I said, go look at his Instagram and his Facebook. I wouldn't pause to talk to me if I were me. I'd keep doing that.
Living the life, as they say. But
Absolutely.
Ryan, pleasure talking to you. Do you have a website you want to direct people to, get more information on the book?
Yeah, it's all at ryanwhite.com, and the book is, it's out on Touchstone, which is Simon & Schuster, so it's available anywhere you get your books.
Great. Ryan, pleasure talking to you. Hopefully we can do it again. I'm guessing you got another biography in the works. If you can tell us what it is. If not, we'll wait and we'll hear later on. I'll have you on again. But thanks for being with us today.
Well, yeah, I can tell you we're updating the Springsteen book in October. That'll be out in softcover, and then my agent would like to know what is next too, and I'll figure that out soon.
Oh, great. We'll talk to you on the Springsteen book. If maybe Elise can give us that contact, we'd love to talk to you then.
Yeah, would love it.
Great. Thanks, Ryan.
All right, thanks.
I'm Stan Brock. 30 years ago, I formed Remote Area Medical to help people overseas. But then we found generations of families in America isolated by poverty from the health care they need. Together, we can take dental, vision, and medical help to 1 million adults and their kids, right here at home in the United States of America.
If you'd like to order the book we're talking about, please go to DougMilesMedia.com and enter the author's name in the Amazon search box. Thank you for listening. Please come back soon for more conversations here at DougMilesMedia.com. This has been a presentation of Doug Miles Media, all rights reserved. You can listen to or download previous programs at iTunes, Stitcher.com, or DougMilesMedia.com.